They told me golf wasn't for kids like me. I remember walking onto that manicured green for the first time, my cheap second-hand clubs rattling in an old bag, every eye fixed on me. Whispers turned to laughter, and laughter turned to stares sharp enough to cut. A black kid on this course? Not here. I kept my head down, hands shaking, heart pounding. But inside, I made a promise that one day they'd remember this moment for a different reason. And years later, when I slipped on the green jacket, their laughter turned into the silence of disbelief. When you grow up being told you don't belong, every step forward feels like a rebellion. For me, that rebellion began on a golf course, a place where silence was supposed to be sacred, but the only sound I heard was laughter, not applause, not encouragement. Laughter, because I was young, because I was poor, and because I was a black kid in a sport that wasn't built for kids like me. This story isn't just about golf. It's about what happens when the world draws a line and dares you not to cross it. It's about resilience when the odds are stacked, about carrying scars like armor, and about proving that no one can define your limits but you. Tyler Brooks. That's the name they laughed at, the name they dismissed, but it became the name they couldn't ignore. Because every night of lonely practice, every day I was told to quit, every sneer I absorbed in silence. All of it became fuel. Fuel that burned until the day I wore the green jacket, the moment that silenced the very voices that once tried to erase me. And this video will take you through that journey, the pain, the struggle, the doubt, and the triumph. You'll see how failure isn't the end, but the beginning of transformation. You'll learn that the things meant to break you can become the very tools that build you. And you'll feel, step by step, what it means to turn laughter into legacy. Because maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've been laughed at, doubted, pushed aside. This story is for you. To remind you that no matter who you are, no matter where you start, the world doesn't get to write your ending. You do. And before we dive in, I want you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop a comment telling me your country and city. I want to know where in the world this story is reaching, because stories like this aren't just about one person. They belong to all of us. I still remember the first time I walked onto a golf course like it happened yesterday. The air smelled different there, like cut grass mixed with expensive perfume drifting from the clubhouse. The trees around the fairway stood tall, trimmed so perfectly they looked unnatural. Every blade of grass seemed polished, as if no one had ever truly stepped on it. It didn't feel like a field. It felt like a place that wanted to keep people like me out. My bag rattled on my shoulder, the strap dug into my skin, worn thin from years of use before it ever reached my hands. The clubs inside clinked together, not the polished chrome kind with matching logos, but a mismatched collection of second-hand metal, each one scarred with scratches. My shoes squeaked with every step, old sneakers with frayed laces, soles peeling away. They looked out of place against the shining leather golf shoes of the others. The moment I crossed that boundary, silence fell. Conversations halted. Men in pressed polo shirts turned, their sunglasses sliding down their noses so they could get a clearer look. Women in bright visors leaned on their carts, eyebrows raised. The message was clear. What is he doing here? I heard it in their whispers before I even set my bag down. Must be lost. Is he here to carry bags? Wrong place, wrong kid. The words weren't shouted, but they were sharp, carried on the breeze just loud enough to cut through me. Each syllable burned. I was a black kid stepping into a world painted white, a world polished, expensive, and protected by unwritten rules. Rules that said golf wasn't for kids like me. I didn't know then, but this pain was shaping something stronger inside me. The kids my age weren't any kinder. They clustered together, tucked in polos, spotless shoes, gloves fitted tight. Their confidence wasn't just in their swings, it was in their belonging. They laughed loud enough for me to hear, pointing when I adjusted my grip on the bag. One of them muttered, Guess the caddies are getting younger." The group erupted in laughter, high-pitched and cruel, cutting deeper than any blade of grass could. My face flushed, my knees trembled, every instinct screamed for me to turn back, to run, to leave, and never return. But my father's words echoed in my head. "Tyler, you don't let anyone tell you where you don't belong. You decide that." And so I walked forward, though every step felt like dragging a boulder uphill. I placed my bag near the practice tee. My hands shook as I pulled out a club, the grip worn smooth from use. I bent down, set the ball carefully on the tee, and felt every eye on me. My heart pounded in my ears louder than the distant birdsong. They weren't watching to cheer, they were watching to see me fail. I swung. The club sliced through the air and missed completely. The ball rolled a few inches, wobbling off the tee like a joke. Behind me, laughter erupted, sharp and merciless. I reset, tried again, missed again. The laughter grew, blending with whispers of "pathetic" and "he doesn't belong." My chest burned, humiliation washing over me, but I didn't walk away. I couldn't. They wanted me broken, but every failure only carved a deeper hunger inside me. I stayed. For hours I stayed. My shirt clung to my back with sweat. My arms ached, blisters rising on my palms. I swung until my shoulders screamed and my lungs burned. Ball after ball skidded across the ground, bouncing weakly. The others packed up and left, their laughter fading with the sound of car doors slamming in the lot. But I remained. By the time the sun dipped low, the shadows stretched long across the green. The course was silent now, empty except for me and the faint echo of my swings. My hands bled. My body trembled. But I kept going. That night, back in my room, I stared at my palms, raw and blistered, skin torn in places. The sting was unbearable, but I couldn't stop looking. Those hands, scarred and weak, felt like proof. Proof that I had faced their laughter and hadn't quit. Proof that maybe, just maybe, I could fight through. The next morning I went back, and the morning after that, and the one after that. Each time, the laughter returned, sharp and cruel. But little by little, my swings improved. The ball began to fly straighter, farther, cleaner. For a brief second, after one perfect hit, the course grew quiet. Silent. They didn't clap, but they didn't laugh either. That silence was everything. It was proof that even they couldn't deny what they had just seen. I wasn't accepted, not yet, but I had made a crack in their wall. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a fight much bigger than golf. The sound of laughter from that first day on the course stayed with me long after I left. It followed me home, echoing in my head with every step. By the time I reached our small apartment, my shoulders felt heavier than the bag on my back. I dropped it by the door and sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at the cheap, scratched-up clubs that had already become the source of so much shame. My father came in from his shift, his shirt damp with sweat, hands calloused from hours of work. He looked at me, then at the clubs, and finally sat down across from me. His eyes were tired, but filled with something stronger than exhaustion. "You look like you fought a war," he said softly. I couldn't answer. My throat was tight, my chest heavy. The words of those kids, caddy, wrong place, pathetic, were carved into me. Finally, I whispered, "They laughed at me, Dad. They laughed because I don't belong there." He leaned back, studying me. Then slowly, he reached into the bag, pulled out one of the clubs and placed it between us. The metal was dull, the grip worn, but he looked at it like it was made of gold. "Tyler," he said, "this isn't just a club, this is a gift. And gifts are not about how shiny they are, they're about what you do with them." I didn't understand it fully then, but that old, battered club would become the symbol of everything I was fighting for. I asked him why he had even bought me clubs in the first place. We barely had enough to cover rent, and golf was expensive, too expensive for us. He smiled faintly. "Because I saw the way you looked at the game on TV. I saw you watching, studying every swing, every green. I saw you dreaming, and I won't let money decide the size of your dream." His words cut deeper than the laughter ever could. He believed in me, even when the whole world didn't. That belief carried more weight than any insult. That night, we walked to a small park near our apartment. It wasn't a golf course, just an open field with patches of dirt and grass. My father placed a ball on the ground and handed me the club. "Show me," he said. I swung clumsily, the ball skidding a few feet. He clapped anyway, grinning like I'd just hit a perfect shot. "See? You're already better than yesterday." I laughed, shaking my head. But inside, something shifted. For the first time, golf didn't feel like humiliation. It felt like possibility. And possibility, once planted, grows like fire if you feed it. Weeks turned into months. Every evening, after his long shifts, my father came with me to that field. He carried no clubs of his own, just a folding chair. He sat quietly, watching, occasionally offering advice. "Keep your eye on the ball. Bend your knees. Don't swing angry. Swing calm." Sometimes he didn't say anything at all. He just watched, his presence enough to keep me steady. The blisters on my hands grew, then hardened into calluses. My swing became smoother. The ball began to lift off the ground, soaring farther than I thought possible. Each time it did, I looked back at him, and he nodded, pride flickering in his tired eyes. But the reality outside that field didn't change. At the course, the laughter continued. The stares, the whispers, the rejection, it all remained. Yet I no longer carried it alone. Every time they mocked me, I remembered my father's chair, his claps, his quiet belief. It was like armor, invisible but unbreakable. One night, after a particularly long practice, I sat beside him on the bench in silence. "Why do you believe in me so much?" I asked. He looked at me, his face lined with years of hard work. "Because, son, I know what it feels like to be told you don't belong. I spent my whole life hearing it, but I don't want that to be your story. I want yours to be different, bigger, stronger." His words stayed with me long after. Bigger, stronger, different. And from that moment on, every swing I took wasn't just mine, it was ours. The club he gave me wasn't just a tool, it was a promise that no matter how poor we were, no matter how much hate I faced, my dream had value. Every scar on that club mirrored the scars I carried inside, but both were proof of survival. That battered set of clubs became my weapon, my shield, my identity. And each time I stepped onto the course, I carried not just my own fight, but my father's faith. And I knew one day, somehow, I'd make the world see it too. Silence became my teacher. While other kids filled their afternoons with friends, games, and laughter, mine were spent chasing a little white ball across an empty field. The sun would dip behind the rooftops, painting the sky orange, and I'd still be there, swinging until my arms went numb. The only sounds were the thud of my feet, the metallic crack of club against ball, and the steady rhythm of my breath. There were no coaches to guide me, no teammates to cheer me on, just me, the club my father had sacrificed for, and the stubborn fire inside my chest. I studied the way the ball rolled, the arc it made when it actually lifted into the air. I replayed swings I'd seen on television, trying to mimic them until my shoulders burned. Sometimes I got it wrong. Most times I got it wrong. But slowly, painfully, I began to carve out something that felt like my own style. At night, when the field was too dark to see, I stood in front of a cracked mirror in our small apartment, swinging in silence. My mother would shake her head, laughing softly. "That boy's gonna break the furniture," she'd say. But my father never stopped me. He watched, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. In those moments, I wasn't just learning a sport, I was teaching myself how to fight without words. The kids at school didn't understand. They played basketball, football, baseball, the sports that made sense, the ones where they fit. When they asked me what I did after class and I told them golf, they laughed like I'd told the funniest joke of the year. Golf? That's not even a sport. Golf's for old rich white dudes. You? Playing golf? Man, that's ridiculous. Their words stung, but I didn't argue. I just shrugged and walked away, because deep down I knew they were wrong. And every night on that field, every lonely swing, was proof that I was building something they couldn't see. The course was different, though. Every time I stepped onto that manicured grass, the silence was replaced with something else. Mockery, condescension, smirks that told me I didn't belong. I ignored it, even when it tore me apart inside. I knew the only way to answer wasn't with my mouth, but with my game. So I kept working, swing after swing, hour after hour. My hands blistered, then calloused. My back ached, my knees screamed, but I welcomed it. Pain meant progress. Pain meant I was getting closer. And in the stillness of those nights, I realized I wasn't just chasing a ball, I was chasing respect. One night, I stayed out later than usual. The field lights had shut off, and I could barely see the ball at my feet. My father came to find me, flashlight in hand. "Tyler," he said, his voice low but firm, "you can't keep pushing yourself like this. It's late." I looked at him, sweat dripping into my eyes, chest heaving. "Dad, I can't stop now. Not yet." He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, but promise me something. Don't just play to shut them up. Play to be great." His words struck deeper than any lecture. Greatness, not just survival, not just proving people wrong, but becoming something undeniable. From then on, my focus sharpened. I stopped caring about the laughter, the sneers, the insults. I cared about my swing, my balance, my precision. Every movement mattered, every mistake was fuel. When the others slept, I practiced. When the others laughed, I trained. When the others told me I'd never belong, I carved a place anyway. I didn't know when the chance would come, but when it did, I'd be ready. The silence wasn't easy. It was lonely, painful, filled with doubt. Some nights, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if they were right, wondering if I was wasting my time, chasing a dream that was never meant for me. But every morning when I picked up that battered club, the doubt faded, because in the silence I wasn't just practicing golf, I was building myself. And though the world didn't know it yet, I was learning to turn every insult, every laugh, every ounce of hate into something far more dangerous than anger, discipline. And discipline was about to change everything. The day of my first tournament felt like stepping into another universe. The course was brighter, greener, louder than anything I'd ever seen. Parents gathered with clipboards. Kids strutted in matching polos and shiny shoes, and the air buzzed with chatter about handicaps, coaches, and private lessons. I stood off to the side, clutching my mismatched clubs, my shirt faded from too many washes, my sneakers squeaking on the concrete. From the moment I walked through the gates, I felt the stares. Some eyes looked at me with curiosity, others with open disdain. One boy laughed and nudged his friend. "Where'd he get those clubs? Out of the trash?" Another whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "He won't last past the first hole." The laughter rippled through the crowd like wildfire, feeding off itself. I felt my stomach twist, my palms slick with sweat. My father put his hand on my shoulder, steady and strong. "Don't listen to them, Tyler. Just swing like you do at the park." I nodded, but my chest burned with fear. In that moment, I wasn't just swinging for me. I was swinging against every voice that told me I didn't belong. When my name was called, I walked to the tee box. The crowd hushed, waiting, ready to see me stumble. My knees shook, my grip slippery on the club. I could hear the kids behind me whispering, chuckling, already predicting disaster. I took a deep breath. My father's words echoed in my mind. "Don't swing angry. Swing calm." I pulled the club back, exhaled, and swung. The ball cracked against the face of the club, soaring into the air. For a split second, everything went silent. Heads tilted upward, eyes wide. The ball cut through the sky, landed clean on the fairway, rolling further than any of them expected. A murmur spread through the crowd. Not laughter, not whispers, just surprise. I lowered my club, my heart racing. I wanted to smile, but I kept my face steady. I wasn't here for approval. I was here to prove a point. The rest of the round wasn't perfect. I sliced a few shots, missed easy putts, and felt the sting of inexperience. But mixed with the mistakes were flashes of brilliance, drives straighter than the others, chip shots that hugged the green, putts that fell clean into the hole. Each time I succeeded, the whispers grew quieter. Each time I failed, I stood taller, refusing to let them see me break. By the end of the front nine, they weren't laughing anymore. They were watching. As the tournament stretched on, fatigue set in. My arms ached, my legs dragged, but I refused to quit. Every hole felt like a test, every swing like a statement. I wasn't playing just for a scorecard. I was playing for respect. By the time we reached the final hole, I stood tied with two other players. The crowd gathered around, buzzing with anticipation. The same people who had mocked me at the start now leaned forward, curious, waiting to see what I would do. I stepped onto the tee, the last ball in my pocket, my grip firm despite the sweat. My chest rose and fell with each heavy breath. One boy snickered, trying to get in my head. "Don't choke now." I ignored him. I swung. The ball soared, higher and farther than any shot I'd hit all day. It landed square in the middle of the fairway, rolling smooth and true. The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. Real applause. My approach shot wasn't perfect, but it landed close enough for a putt. I walked to the green, the weight of 100 eyes on my back. I bent low, lined up the shot and tapped the ball. It rolled steady, slow, and then dropped into the cup. The cheers rang out, echoing across the course. I stood there, stunned, the putter still in my hands. I hadn't won first place, but I hadn't finished last either. Against all odds, I had stood toe-to-toe with kids who had every advantage, and I had proven I belonged on that grass. And that day, I realized something powerful. The game didn't care about their laughter. The ball only listened to the swing. That first tournament didn't give me a trophy. It didn't erase the stares or silence the prejudice. But it gave me something more important, a glimpse of what could be if I refused to quit. I walked off the course with my father by my side, his smile wide, his eyes gleaming with pride. "See, son," he said, "they can laugh all they want, but they can't change what's inside you." And for the first time, I believed him. After that first tournament, something inside me shifted. I had tasted what it felt like to stand on the same ground as kids who had every advantage I didn't. I hadn't beaten them all, but I hadn't been beaten down either. And that small victory lit a fire I couldn't put out. I trained harder. Every spare moment went into my swing, my stance, my focus. While the other kids at school talked about parties, dates, and games, I thought about yardages, putting lines, and grip pressure. I carried my clubs like a soldier carries his rifle, always ready, always practicing. It didn't take long before people started to notice. At first, it was just whispers, stories about that black kid who hit the ball like a pro. Then, it became harder to ignore. At local tournaments, I wasn't just showing up. I was placing higher, sometimes top 3. Then suddenly I started winning. The first time I held a trophy, small and plastic though it was, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My father stood in the crowd, clapping harder than anyone. The kids who once mocked me stared in silence. Some of them even offered hesitant congratulations, but I could see it in their eyes. They weren't happy for me. They were scared. Because talent is easy to dismiss until it starts breaking their records. As the months turned into years, I began to dominate the junior circuit. My drives stretched farther than the others, my short game sharper, my composure unshaken even when crowds tried to rattle me. One by one, I broke course records, scores that had stood for years, held by kids whose families owned memberships and private coaches. The more I won, the louder the resistance became. Tournament organizers double-checked my scores like they couldn't believe what they saw. Parents whispered to officials, asking if there had been a mistake. One even said out loud, "It's not fair. Our kids don't stand a chance against him." Fair. That word stung more than the laughter ever had. Where was fairness when I walked onto the course with sneakers instead of spikes? Where was fairness when they laughed at my second-hand clubs? Where was fairness when I was told to quit before I'd even begun? I didn't answer them. I let my game do it for me. Every swing was an argument, every putt a rebuttal. I didn't yell, didn't brag, didn't gloat. I just played. And playing was enough. But the higher I climbed, the more I realized something. The world doesn't cheer when you rise, it waits for you to fall. By the time I reached high school, I wasn't just a player, I was the player. Articles in local papers began to appear. Tyler Brooks, the prodigy no one saw coming. Coaches and recruiters started showing up at tournaments. For the first time, people whispered my name not with mockery, but with awe. But admiration came with a price. Rivals targeted me. Some kids tried to intimidate me on the course, making jokes, stepping into my line of sight, muttering under their breath. Others tried to befriend me, only to turn their backs when I beat them. And still, the old prejudice never left. Golf isn't for black kids. I heard it at nearly every tournament, sometimes from other players, sometimes from parents, sometimes even from spectators. No matter how many trophies I held, to them, I was still an intruder. But that only fueled me. Every insult became another reason to focus harder, swing cleaner, push farther. I didn't just want to play, I wanted to leave no doubt. I wanted my name on every record board so they could never erase it. And one by one I did. But what I didn't know then was that records don't just draw respect, they also draw enemies. The more I won, the more pressure I felt. Suddenly, I wasn't just Tyler Brooks. I was a symbol. Reporters wanted interviews, fans wanted autographs, critics wanted me to fail. I wasn't playing alone anymore. I was carrying every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. It was heavy, too heavy at times. But when I stood on the tee, gripping my father's old club, or the newer ones we'd managed to afford, I reminded myself why I started. Not for fame, not for records, not even for trophies. I started because the game told me no, and I wanted to answer with yes, and with every swing I did. The first time I saw my name in the newspaper, I didn't believe it. Local prodigy breaks record again. My photo was small, blurry, tucked between ads and community announcements, but to me, it felt like front-page news. I held the paper so tightly that the ink smudged onto my hands. For the first time, my dream wasn't just alive, it was visible. Soon it wasn't just local papers. Larger outlets began calling. Reporters wanted interviews. Scouts showed up at my tournaments, clipboards in hand, their eyes tracking every swing. I had gone from the boy they laughed at to the boy they couldn't ignore. And with each new article, each new headline, I felt the world's spotlight burning hotter. At first, it felt like victory. Crowds gathered at tournaments, kids asked for autographs, adults shook my hand like I was already a pro. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded my face, and for once the whispers weren't mocking. They were curious, even admiring. I thought I had finally silenced the laughter, but I was wrong. Because the world doesn't just watch you in the spotlight, it waits for you to slip. The pressure came quickly. Expectations multiplied. Suddenly every swing wasn't just a swing, it was a test. Every miss, Every stumble, every bogey became evidence that maybe I wasn't as good as they said. Reporters who once called me a prodigy began asking sharper questions. Can he handle the pressure? Is Tyler Brooks really ready for the next level? Their praise had been shallow, and I was just beginning to see how fast it could turn. On the course, rivals doubled down. They weren't just playing against me anymore. They were playing for the chance to dethrone me. Some whispered insults, others celebrated loudly whenever I faltered. Every mistake I made felt magnified, broadcast under a microscope. At school, I was treated differently too. Some kids who had once mocked me now wanted to sit with me, to claim they knew me before I made it. Others grew cold, their jealousy cutting sharper than insults ever had. Friends I thought I had disappeared. I was surrounded by people, yet I had never felt lonelier. The spotlight wasn't just bright, it was blinding. My father tried to keep me grounded. "Tyler," he said, "don't let the noise get in your head. Play your game, that's all that matters." But the noise was deafening. Coaches dissected my every move. Fans expected perfection. Strangers sent me letters, some filled with encouragement, others dripping with hate. "You're an inspiration," one would say. "You don't belong here," another would spit. The contrast tore at me. How could I be both hero and intruder at the same time? How could I be celebrated and despised in the same breath? The truth hit me one night after a tournament. I had played well, not perfect, but good enough for a strong finish. As I walked off the course, cameras flashed, fans reached out their hands, reporters shouted questions. I forced a smile, trying to look like the confident star they expected. But inside, I felt hollow, because I realized something. I wasn't playing for me anymore. I was playing for everyone else. The joy I once felt, swinging in silence on that empty field, was slipping away. The game that had been my refuge was becoming my prison. And I didn't know it then, but the fall always starts when you forget why you began. The spotlight had given me recognition, opportunities, and a taste of the life I had dreamed of. But it also demanded a price I wasn't sure I could pay. I couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. I couldn't fail without being judged. And I couldn't breathe without feeling the weight of expectation pressing on my chest. I told myself it was worth it. That every trophy, every record, every headline was proof I belonged. But in the quiet moments, alone in my room, staring at the clubs my father had given me, I wondered if belonging was enough. Because what good is being in the spotlight if it burns away the very reason you started chasing the dream? The first time I felt the pain, I ignored it. Just a twinge in my back, nothing more. I told myself it was part of the grind. Every athlete feels it. But the pain came back, sharper each time, until it wasn't just a whisper in my body, it was a scream. I bent to tie my shoe one morning and nearly collapsed. Still, I kept playing. The spotlight demanded it. Reporters, fans, sponsors, they didn't want excuses. They wanted wins, and I was too afraid to disappoint them. So I smiled in front of the cameras and gritted my teeth behind the scenes, convincing myself I could push through. But golf is unforgiving. One bad swing, one wrong twist, and suddenly my body betrayed me. I collapsed on the course during a tournament, clutching my back, the crowd gasping as officials rushed over. That image spread everywhere, the prodigy, the unstoppable force, reduced to pain on the grass. And just like that, the whispers returned, not of awe, but of doubt. Doctors told me I needed rest. Surgery, maybe. Time away from the game. But time was the one thing I didn't think I had. The world moves fast, and I feared if I stepped away, I'd be forgotten. So I tried to rush back, tried to prove I was still invincible. It only made things worse. My body stiffened, my swing lost its rhythm, and my scores plummeted. The same reporters who had once called me a genius now asked, "Has Tyler Brooks peaked already?" Headlines shifted from praise to skepticism, from admiration to ridicule. As if the injury wasn't enough, the weight of fame pulled me down in other ways. My private life became public fodder. Rumors swirled, scandals spread, some true, many exaggerated, all destructive. Every mistake I made off the course was amplified, every flaw dissected. The media didn't just report on me, they hunted me. And the same people who had once cheered my name now reveled in my downfall. He was never that good. Just hype. We knew he'd crack eventually. Their words stung more than any injury. The same world that built me up was now celebrating my collapse. I tried to hold on. I tried to fight back, but the harder I pushed, the more the game slipped through my fingers. Tournaments that once felt like home now felt like battlegrounds I couldn't win. Every missed cut, every bogey, every stumble on the green chipped away at my confidence. One night, after another brutal loss, I sat alone in my hotel room staring at the trophy shelf I had once been so proud of. It no longer felt like proof of greatness. It felt like a reminder of what I was losing. My phone buzzed endlessly, reporters seeking statements, critics mocking me online, sponsors threatening to walk away. I wanted to throw it all away. The trophies, the headlines, the pressure. For the first time since I first picked up a club, I wondered if the game had taken more than it had ever given. My father tried to remind me of who I was. Tyler, you're more than this moment. Pain doesn't erase what you've done. But his words couldn't drown out the noise. I felt like I was drowning, dragged under by expectations, injuries, and shame. For the first time in my life, I thought about walking away. For good. The fall wasn't one dramatic moment. It was a slow unraveling. Each headline, each injury, each rumor pulled at a thread until I was left exposed, broken, unrecognizable even to myself. Fans turned into critics, friends turned into strangers, and the game that had once saved me now felt like it was destroying me. Looking back, I realize now that every great rise carries the seeds of its own fall. I had been so focused on proving the world wrong that I forgot to take care of myself. And when the spotlight grew too hot, it didn't just dim, it burned me alive. But even in the ashes of that fall, a part of me refused to let go. Deep down, I knew my story wasn't finished. Not yet. I used to love seeing my name in the papers. It meant I was being recognized, that the world finally saw what I was capable of. But when the fall came, the headlines changed, and suddenly every word printed felt like a knife. Brooks Dunn? Injury or excuse? The prodigy that couldn't last. I'd wake up to see my face on TV, not for victories, but for failures. Sports anchors who once praised my discipline and composure now tore me apart, frame by frame, swing by swing. They circled my grimaces in slow motion, analyzed my posture like I was a broken machine, not a human being. The worst part wasn't what they said, it was how they said it. Like my downfall entertained them more than my rise ever had. The world wasn't just reporting my pain, it was enjoying the show. Everywhere I went, I couldn't escape it. At airports, people glanced at me, some with pity, others with mockery. At restaurants, I overheard strangers talking about me as if I wasn't even there. Online, the comments were brutal, unfiltered, relentless. He's washed. Guess golf isn't for him after all. Should have stuck to being a caddy. Each sentence was a dagger. I tried not to read them, but curiosity always won. And every time, I felt smaller. Reporters camped outside tournaments, shoving microphones in my face. Tyler, are you done? Tyler, is this the end? Tyler, how does it feel to disappoint so many people? How does it feel? It felt like drowning. It felt like the world was piling weights onto my chest every single day, daring me to suffocate. I wanted to scream, to shout that I was more than my worst moment. But no one wanted to hear that. They wanted scandal, collapse, failure. That sold better than triumph ever did. The same hands that built my pedestal were now pulling it out from under me. Even people who had once been in my corner turned their backs. Sponsors vanished. Coaches distanced themselves. Former allies stopped returning calls. It was like I had contracted a disease, and everyone was afraid of being infected by my downfall. The silence from those I trusted hurt almost as much as the noise from those who mocked me. My father tried to remind me that this was temporary, that champions rise and fall, that I wasn't finished. But when I looked around, all I saw were headlines screaming that I was. The game itself felt different too. Every swing carried the weight of 1,000 judgments. Every miss confirmed what the papers were already writing. Every stumble became a viral clip. The joy was gone. All that remained was pressure, and pressure without passion is poison. One night, unable to sleep, I sat at my desk with the latest article spread in front of me. The headline read, "From Prodigy to Punchline." My chest tightened, my hands trembling as I read the words. Punchline. That's what I had become. A joke. I crumpled the paper in my fist and slammed it against the wall. Rage burned through me, but underneath it was something worse. Fear. Fear that maybe they were right. Maybe I really was finished. And for the first time, I wondered if the world would ever remember me for anything other than failure. The headlines didn't just question my game, they questioned my character. Rumors about my personal life spread like wildfire. Stories twisted, exaggerated, outright fabricated. Suddenly, I wasn't just a struggling athlete, I was a villain in their narrative. I tried to fight it, to correct the lies, to defend myself. But the more I spoke, the more they twisted my words. Silence made me look guilty. Speaking made me look desperate. There was no winning, so I stopped trying. I shut the world out. I avoided interviews, avoided cameras, avoided people. I thought if I disappeared long enough, maybe they'd forget me. But the truth is, the world never forgets. It just waits for the next fall to feast on. Looking back, I realize now that it wasn't the headlines themselves that broke me. It was how much I believed them. I let strangers with pens and cameras tell me who I was. I handed them the power to define my story, but deep down, a small voice whispered that this wasn't the end, that there was still a swing-left silence. That's what my life became after the headlines swallowed me whole. The crowds faded. The cameras disappeared. The reporters found new stories to devour, and I was left alone, with nothing but pain as company. The phone that once buzzed non-stop with calls and opportunities sat still, gathering dust. Friends who had sworn they'd stand by me went silent. Sponsors who once paraded me like a prize cut ties overnight. The spotlight that had once felt suffocating now felt like a void. I thought I wanted quiet, but when it came, it was unbearable. The pain wasn't just in the silence. It was in my body. My back ached every morning, stiff and unrelenting, reminding me that I was no longer the unbreakable kid who could swing until the sun went down. Some days, I couldn't even bend to tie my shoes without wincing. The game I loved had carved scars into me I wasn't sure would ever heal, but the louder pain was inside, the ache of becoming invisible. I tried to keep practicing, at least in small ways, but every swing reminded me of what I had lost. My body screamed. My confidence faltered. The ball no longer listened the way it once had. Each mishit echoed louder than the cheers of my victories ever did. So I stopped. For weeks, then months, I avoided the course altogether. I couldn't bear to see the greens, couldn't bear the memories of who I used to be. Golf had been my sanctuary, my weapon, my identity. Now, it was a battlefield littered with ghosts. I spent days in my apartment, curtains drawn, phone off. The world moved on, and I stayed still. My father tried to reach me, knocking on my door, calling my name, reminding me of who I was. But even his words couldn't reach me sometimes. Because deep down, I was afraid. afraid that he had believed in something that no longer existed, afraid that the dream we built together had died and I had killed it. I wasn't just losing the game, I was losing myself. Nights were the hardest, the silence grew heavier in the dark, filling every corner of my room. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying my life in fragments, the laughter from the course, my father's claps in the park, the first trophy in my hands, the headlines that crowned me a prodigy. And then, the fall, the collapse, the mockery. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life, because the Tyler Brooks I remembered didn't feel like me anymore. He felt like a stranger, a character that had been written and erased by the world's pen. I wanted to disappear completely, to vanish where no one could point, laugh, or judge. But even in that darkness there was a spark, a memory I couldn't shake. The way my father's eyes lit up when he handed me that first club. The way he said, "Don't swing angry, swing calm." His words haunted me, not because they reminded me of who I had been, but because they whispered of who I still could be. And that whisper was the only sound that kept me alive in the silence. Slowly I began to realize something. Pain wasn't the enemy, it was proof. Proof that I had lived, that I had tried, that I had risked everything for a dream bigger than myself. Pain meant I wasn't finished yet, because as long as I could feel, I could fight. I didn't know when or how, but somewhere inside me, I knew this couldn't be the end of my story. Not after everything, not after all the nights on that empty field, all the swings in the dark, all the battles I'd already fought. The silence was suffocating. The pain was real, but buried beneath both was something unbreakable. The same stubborn fire that had carried me from a kid with cheap clubs to a name the world once feared. And one day soon, that fire would burn again. In me, that someday, somehow, I'd make the world write a different headline. Silence. That's what my life became after the headlines swallowed me whole. The crowds faded, the cameras disappeared, the reporters found new stories to devour, and I was left alone, with nothing but pain as company. The phone that once buzzed non-stop with calls and opportunities sat still, gathering dust. Friends who had sworn they'd stand by me went silent. Sponsors who once paraded me like a prize cut ties overnight. The spotlight that had once felt suffocating now felt like a void. I thought I wanted quiet, but when it came, it was unbearable. The pain wasn't just in the silence, it was in my body. My back ached every morning, stiff and unrelenting, reminding me that I was no longer the unbreakable kid who could swing until the sun went down. Some days I couldn't even bend to tie my shoes without wincing. The game I loved had carved scars into me I wasn't sure would ever heal, but the louder pain was inside, the ache of becoming invisible. I tried to keep practicing, at least in small ways, but every swing reminded me of what I had lost. My body screamed, my confidence faltered. The ball no longer listened the way it once had. Each mishit echoed louder than the cheers of my victories ever did, so I stopped. For weeks, then months, I avoided the course altogether. I couldn't bear to see the greens, couldn't bear the memories of who I used to be. Golf had been my sanctuary, my weapon, my identity. Now it was a battlefield littered with ghosts. I spent days in my apartment, curtains drawn, phone off. The world moved on, and I stayed still. My father tried to reach me, knocking on my door, calling my name, reminding me of who I was. But even his words couldn't reach me sometimes. Because deep down, I was afraid. Afraid that he had believed in something that no longer existed. Afraid that the dream we built together had died and I had killed it. I wasn't just losing the game, I was losing myself. Nights were the hardest, the silence grew heavier in the dark, filling every corner of my room. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying my life in fragments, the laughter from the course, my father's claps in the park, the first trophy in my hands, the headlines that crowned me a prodigy. And then, the fall, The collapse, the mockery. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life, because the Tyler Brooks I remembered didn't feel like me anymore. He felt like a stranger, a character that had been written and erased by the world's pen. I wanted to disappear completely, to vanish where no one could point, laugh, or judge. But even in that darkness there was a spark, a memory I couldn't shake. The way my father's eyes lit up when he handed me that first club. The way he said, "Don't swing angry, swing calm." His words haunted me, not because they reminded me of who I had been, but because they whispered of who I still could be, and that whisper was the only sound that kept me alive in the silence. Slowly I began to realize something. Pain wasn't the enemy, it was proof. Proof that I had lived, that I had tried, that I had risked everything for a dream bigger than myself. Pain meant I wasn't finished yet, because as long as I could feel, I could fight. I didn't know when or how, but somewhere inside me, I knew this couldn't be the end of my story. Not after everything, not after all the nights on that empty field, all the swings in the dark, all the battles I'd already fought. The silence was suffocating. The pain was real, but buried beneath both was something unbreakable. The same stubborn fire that had carried me from a kid with cheap clubs to a name the world once feared. And one day soon, that fire would burn again. The first time I stepped back onto a course after everything, it didn't feel like home. It felt like trespassing. The same fairways that once carried my dreams now carried ghosts of laughter, of victory, of failure. My shoes crunched against the gravel path, and with every step I felt eyes on me again. Not the eyes of admiration I once knew, but the eyes of doubt. Whispers floated through the crowd, sharp as ever. "Why's he here? Isn't he done? He'll never make it through a round." They didn't even try to hide it anymore. To them, I wasn't a competitor. I was a relic, a has-been clinging to scraps of relevance. But I didn't come back to convince them. I came back to convince myself. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't proving the world wrong. It's proving to yourself that you still belong. The first practice swings felt foreign. My body stiff, my grip awkward, my rhythm broken. The ball skittered across the grass, mocking me. Each mishit echoed the voices of critics, headlines calling me finished. But I stayed. I hit another and another. The pain shot up my back, my hands shook, but I refused to stop. I knew I couldn't rebuild overnight. I had to relearn patience, discipline, silence, the very things that had built me once before. When I entered my first tournament back, the atmosphere was colder than ever. Crowds gathered not to cheer, but to watch me fail. Kids who once looked up to me now whispered jokes. Journalists aimed their cameras like vultures circling, ready to capture my collapse. The first round was rough. I shanked drives, missed easy putts, bogeyed holes I should have birdied. By the ninth, I was near the bottom of the leaderboard. Laughter trickled through the crowd, sharp and merciless. But as I lined up another shot, I remembered the park where it all began, the dirt patch where my father clapped for swings that barely moved the ball. And I realized something. I didn't need perfection. I just needed persistence. Because resilience isn't about winning every battle. It's about refusing to surrender the war. Day 2 of the tournament felt different. My swing was still stiff, my back still sore, but something clicked. The ball began to fly straighter, my putts rolled cleaner, my confidence crept back inch by inch. I wasn't dominating, I wasn't breaking records, but I wasn't collapsing either, and that mattered. Each hole finished felt like a victory, each par like a trophy. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about headlines, fans, or critics. I was thinking about the game. The sound of the club meeting the ball, the arc against the sky, the feel of the grass under my feet. Golf, stripped of noise, was still beautiful. People noticed. The jeers softened into murmurs of surprise. A few hesitant claps broke through. For a moment the world seemed unsure. Was this the end of a washed-up player or the start of something new? I didn't answer them. I let the game speak. And as I walked off that course, battered but unbroken, I knew one thing for certain: the story wasn't over yet. I didn't win that tournament. I didn't even come close. But walking away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in the scoreboard, but in myself. Pride that I had faced the voices, the laughter, the doubt, and still swung anyway. The return wasn't about reclaiming trophies or headlines. It was about reclaiming my identity, about remembering why I started, about honoring the promise I made to myself as a boy with cheap clubs and blistered hands that I wouldn't quit, no matter how hard they tried to break me. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning, because the game that had once destroyed me was also the only thing that could save me. When I heard I'd been invited to the Masters, I almost laughed, not out of joy, out of disbelief. After everything, after the injuries, the scandals, the years of silence, the idea that I would walk onto Augusta's sacred grass felt unreal. To many, it was a mistake, a pity invite, a chance for the world to watch me fail on the biggest stage of all. But to me, it was something else entirely. It was a chance. From the moment I stepped onto the course, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. The azaleas bloomed like fire, the greens gleamed like glass, and every corner of that place whispered the names of legends who had walked before me. And there I was, Tyler Brooks, the kid who didn't belong. Again. The crowd buzzed with the same cruel curiosity I'd known my whole life. Why is he here? This will be embarrassing. He's finished. Their words followed me to the first tee, just like they had when I was a boy. I gripped my driver. My hands trembled, my breath caught, my heart thundered, and then I swung. The ball cracked through the air, soaring down the fairway. The sound of disbelief rippled through the gallery. For the first time in years, the whispers weren't mocking, they were stunned. The first day was survival. My back ached, my swing wasn't perfect, but I fought for every shot. Pars felt like victories, birdies felt like miracles. I wasn't leading, but I wasn't collapsing either. And for a man they said was done, that alone was newsworthy. Day 2, something shifted. My body loosened, my rhythm steadied, and suddenly the ball obeyed me again. Drive split the fairway, irons landed soft on the greens, putts rolled true. The crowd's tone changed, from pity to surprise to awe. By the end of the round, my name appeared on the leaderboard. Not at the top, but close enough to matter. Reporters scrambled, headlines shifted. Brooks still standing. The return no one expected. I felt it too. For the first time since the fall, I believed again. But belief is fragile, and the final day would test mine like never before. The last round was chaos. The pressure was suffocating, every hole a war. My rivals were younger, stronger, sharper. They had the crowds on their side, the momentum, the aura of invincibility. I had none of that. All I had was pain in my body and fire in my soul. Shot after shot, I clawed my way forward. I made mistakes, yes, but I refused to fold. I scrambled out of bunkers, saved pars from impossible lies, drained putts that defied logic. And with each miracle shot, the crowd's noise grew louder, shifting from mockery to respect, from doubt to hope. By the time I reached the final hole, the impossible had become real. If I birdied, I could take the lead. Me, the has-been, the joke, the man they buried years ago, stood on the edge of history again. The gallery went silent. My hands shook as I placed the ball on the tee. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Don't swing angry, swing calm. I swung. The ball soared, high and pure, landing perfectly on the fairway. The crowd roared, one shot left. I walked to the green, the weight of the moment pressing down. The putt was long, uphill, with a cruel break at the end, the kind of putt that makes or breaks legends. I crouched low, studying the line, my breath shallow, my palms sweated, my chest thudded. I remembered every laugh, every insult, every headline that called me finished. And I remembered the boy on the park field, swinging with blistered hands under the watchful eyes of his father. This was for him. I struck the putt. The ball rolled smooth, climbing, curving, slowing, then dropping into the cup with a thud that shook the course. The gallery exploded. Cheers thundered. Hats flew into the air. Strangers screamed my name. My knees buckled. Tears blurred my vision. I had done it. Against every odd, against every critic, against the weight of the world, I had done it. And in that moment I realized the miracle wasn't the win. It was the fact that I never quit. That tournament didn't just put my name back in the headlines. It rewrote them. I wasn't a prodigy or a scandal or a fallen star anymore. I was something more dangerous, more powerful. I was proof. Proof that no matter how far you fall, you can rise again. And as the green jacket slid over my shoulders, I felt the laughter of the past finally fade into silence. The roar of the crowd still echoes in my chest. When the final putt dropped and the world erupted, I felt time freeze. Strangers screamed my name. Reporters scrambled to capture every second, and flashes from cameras lit the course like lightning. But for me, the world shrank down to a single moment, the green jacket being draped over my shoulders. The fabric was heavier than I expected, heavy with history, heavy with meaning. The green wasn't just a color, it was a crown, a symbol reserved for the few who conquered Augusta, and now, after years of being laughed at, doubted, broken, and discarded, it was mine. I closed my eyes, and for a split second, I wasn't a man standing on the biggest stage of golf. I was a boy again, standing on a cracked patch of dirt in the park, gripping a worn-out club, listening to my father's clap as the ball rolled a few feet forward. The jacket wasn't just proof I had won. It was proof I had survived. As I looked into the crowd, I saw familiar faces. Some were the same kids who had once mocked me, now grown, their mouths open in disbelief. Others were rivals who had doubted me, now forced to clap as I stood where they thought I'd never stand. And beyond them, thousands of strangers, united in a single sound, applause. But the loudest voice in my heart was my father's. I pictured him in his folding chair at the park, nodding with pride after every swing, no matter how ugly. I wished he could have been there beside me, but in truth, he always was. Every step, every shot, every battle, I carried him with me. For years, they told me golf wasn't for kids like me. They told me I didn't belong, that I was a mistake, an intruder, a joke. And now, standing there with the green jacket on my shoulders, I realized something. I had turned their laughter into my legacy. Because sometimes the sweetest victory isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. The cameras followed me everywhere that night. Reporters asked the same question over and over. Tyler, what does this mean to you? I could have talked about records, I could have talked about redemption, but instead I said the truth. It means that no matter where you come from, no matter what they say, your dream has value, and if you fight for it long enough, no one can take it away. The words didn't silence the critics forever. There would always be doubters, always be whispers, but they no longer mattered, because the jacket wasn't just fabric, it was armor, proof that I belonged, proof that the boy with cheap clubs had become the man who conquered the game. And as I held the trophy, I thought about the next generation. The kids watching from broken neighborhoods, staring at televisions the way I once did, daring to dream of places they were told they didn't belong. Maybe one of them saw me and thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too. And that, more than the victory, was the legacy I wanted to leave behind. The applause eventually faded. The cameras turned to other stories. But the moment remained. The boy who didn't belong had become the man who rewrote the rules. My story wasn't perfect. It was messy, painful, filled with mistakes and scars. But maybe that's why it mattered. Because life isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. From the first laugh on the course, to the silence in my darkest nights, to the roar when I wore the green jacket, I carried it all, and I wouldn't change a thing, because the journey wasn't just about winning. It was about showing the world that belonging isn't something they give you. It's something you take. And I took it. They said golf wasn't for black kids. They laughed when I walked onto the course with cheap clubs and blistered hands. They wrote me off when I fell, when I broke, when I disappeared. But tonight, with the green jacket on my shoulders, I stand as living proof. You are not defined by their laughter. You are defined by how many times you rise. If this story moved you, subscribe, like, and drop a comment telling us your country and city, because this legacy belongs to all of us.